violence space. Her book, Look What You Made Me Do, the title, one of many blaming statements throughout the pages, is one of the most powerful true crime books I have ever read. With thorough research and a gentle hand, she tells the story of women devastated by the violence ex-partners inflict on their children as payback. This haunting book can teach us so much about the signs we must all look out for and about the failings of the system that allows this to keep happening. Vicky Petratus, award-winning author and podcaster. Look What You Made Me Do is an essential read to understand family violence. Megan's decades of work covering cases of fathers murdering their children in retaliatory homicides aimed at punishing their former partners is harrowing but also trailblazing. She calls out these unimaginable acts for what they are: cruel, calculating, and misogyny in its most extreme form. Emily Webb, true crime author and podcaster. An important book that shines a light on a dark topic and advocates for victim-centric approaches to addressing violence against women, holding men accountable for their role and responsibility to change their behaviour. Judging panel from Sisters in Crime Australia's Davitt Awards Best Non-Fiction Book 2016. It's not always easy to open your emotionally crippling wounds for everyone to absorb, but I have shared my story openly as the circumstances are too important to be forgiven. Women like me are the voices who have carried pain in our hearts and cry every time we see another family on the news that may have been saved. We hope through this book you will hear our voices and have the courage to really listen. Michelle Steck, survivor and anti-domestic violence campaigner. Look What You Made Me Do is an emotionally gripping retelling of women's experiences with family and domestic violence that are far too common. But it is through sharing these stories that we are able to lift the sense of shame that clouds victims' survivors and debunk the myths around intimacy, power and control to truly understand the forms DFV can take. Each chapter is written with sensitivity and grace and stays with the reader long after the final page is turned. We must continue to tell these stories to create change and push for law reform. Mark Woolley, Small Steps for Hannah Foundation Chair. Forward. The stories in this book have been as painful for me to process and write as they have been for the mothers who have been courageous enough to share what it is like to live with the knowledge that their children were murdered simply to punish them. During the writing process, there have been times when some of them have had to stop and ask themselves if they were strong enough to revisit these harrowing events. At other times, I've asked myself whether I'm able to do justice to such heartbreaking stories of loss. In the end, we all agreed that these tragedies, as confronting as they are too important not to be told. During more than 40 years in news, initially as a court reporter and later as a crime writer, I have spent a great deal of my working life writing the harrowing accounts of grieving parents whose children have been cruelly taken from them in horrific and violent circumstances. As a young mum who nursed a teenager through cancer, I spent a lot of time around death, and while my own son survived, I met many children on that journey who were not as fortunate. But as painful as that experience was, at least their grieving parents had the opportunity to hold them close in their final hours and say goodbye. Tragically, for the parents whose children lose their lives through sudden, horrific, violent crimes such as murder, there are no goodbyes, just an endless roller coaster of trauma, grief, and guilt. Sadly, as I have observed firsthand, that anguish is magnified in cases of retaliatory filicide, the murder of a child under 18, in which a child is murdered by an aggrieved biological parent to pay their former partner back for ending an unrewarding, often abusive relationship. Unlike other types of child homicide, the young casualties of revenge murders are not the true targets of a killer dad's murderous rage, but collateral damage in crimes spawned by hatred and spite. The real target of crimes such as these is the surviving parent, most commonly the child's mother.